and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum, and this week I am happy to be joined by Blanche Wiesen-Cook, who you've seen as a guest on this show before. She is the University Distinguished Professor of History at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And she's also, as you know, the author of the definitive 3-volume biography of Eleanor Roosevelt. And welcome.
Delighted to be here,
Good.
Andy. Thank you so much.
Let's get to the news. This week, the Trump administration was set back in the courts on its campaigns against immigrants and transgender people. But he's still working to fill the courts with anti-LGBT bigots and erase LGBT existence from government surveys.
And Trump's nominee for Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, refused to repudiate his characterization of homosexuality as a perversion.
I imagine Kim Jong-un agrees with him on that. With 3 very notable deaths to report this week, veteran lesbian activist Donna Redwing, LGBT rights attorney David Buckel, and poet J.D. McCLatchy.
And the Pulitzer Prizes included a newly out gay winner. Which we'll tell you about.
Out lesbian Cynthia Nixon is endorsed for governor of New York by the Working Families Party.
Chinese activists get censors to back down on banning gay content on a social media site. Truly important.
In Trinidad and Tobago, a high court judge declared the anti-buggery statute unconstitutional.
Andy reviews 4 new theater productions, including A Mean King Lear and the musical version of Mean Girls.
And our guest at the back of the show is Aine Gordon, author of a play about a pioneering gay psychiatrist who challenged the American Psychiatric Association's classification of homosexuality as a mental illness from behind a mask in 1972. And I guess we're out of time now, so we just say goodbye. Now, a lot of news this week. The U.S. Supreme Court this week, with Neil Gorsuch in the majority, struck down a law that makes it easier to deport immigrants because of certain kinds of crimes. Gorsuch said it was too vague, so Trump lost on that. That was rather remarkable. And then on the transgender ban, which is in the court still, the Army Secretary, Esper, and the Chief of Staff General Mike Milley, under questioning from Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, both said they had no concerns about unit cohesion with transgender people in the military. And that contradicts the report drafted by Mike Pence and his band of religious right-wingers. But Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, defended the trans ban, even though he had originally said he didn't need it. And then the Coast Guard Commandant said he was okay with transgender people. So it's they don't know what they're doing over there, do they? Well,
the good news is the people in the military are supporting people in the military.
Yes. Now, what about Mike Pompeo? He's up for Secretary of State, right? And he was being grilled, and because they have to vote on him to confirm him as Secretary of State. He's the head of the CIA right now.
He said he treats everybody equally, but yes, queers are perverted.
Well, he wouldn't repeat that. He has called us perverted. He has said this is a perversion, and Senator Cory Booker pressed him on that, and he just said, ask anybody over here at the CIA. I treat everybody fairly without regard. He even said sexual orientation. So I don't know where that nomination is going to go, but we can't count on him to raise LGBT issues around the world the way some past secretaries of state have been able to do.
That's why we all need to be organized for action.
Yes.
More than ever.
Back to the trans ban. In Seattle, a federal judge named of Pechman, P-E-C-H-M-A-N, is keeping an injunction in place in court challenging the trans ban. It's scheduled for trial. The Trump administration wanted it dismissed and wanted, what do they call it, summary judgment. Just let us go. We have the right to do this. You don't have any say in this. So it was really a breakthrough. But the big breakthrough in this case was this judge said, I am subjecting this case to strict scrutiny, the highest level of scrutiny available to a judge. They really only offer it for, I believe, race and sex at this point. And for this trans ban, which is sex discrimination, that's what they're talking about doing. So, you know, that is a huge
really
legal
big
breakthrough this week. Yeah. All right, but that's this judge. In Louisiana, what about this Wendy Vitter? She's up for the federal bench there. She's an anti-abortion activist, and she's counsel for the Catholic Archdiocese. She refused to say whether Brown v. Board of Education was correctly decided. Now, that was in 1954. You might remember that.
Yes.
I was just 1 year old, but I remember it.
And we still haven't desegregated the nation, and there's a war against public education all across the country. Schools are closing. And so this right-wing thing says, okay, let's just, go back to slavery? Well, with the prison industrial complex, we're back to slavery.
Well,
we are in a terrible situation.
As bad as it's been.
Yes.
But especially if these kind of judges get in. Wendy Vitter was unanimously rated unqualified by the American Bar Association. She said Planned Parenthood kills over 150,000 females a year. She didn't give us a cite for that. And we're also fighting against a guy named Stuart Kyle Duncan, an anti-trans Louisiana Assistant Attorney General. It's very, very depressing. But there are some bright spots. You went to a dedication this week for one of our national heroes, Edie Windsor. What happened?
It was wonderful. It was really one of those great moments in history where activists, politicians, people who loved Edie Windsor, who gave us the right to marriage equality.
Nationwide.
And one of the things that I learned was that Edie was an activist for decades against war. She was an activist in the peace movement. She was an activist in the civil rights movement, in the women's rights movement, and then in the gay movement. She and her partner, Thea Spire, got married in Canada, and Brendan Fay, who drove them up there, was there. It was a great celebration.
And this was a building. They were putting up a plaque at the building where she lived at 2 Fifth Avenue. Where also
Bella Abzug,
the great Bella Abzug, who was
who also lived there,
a former congresswoman and a great feminist leader,
and a great hero for all of our, civil liberties, like Edie Windsor. But one of the things there are two things I really didn't know. She always was smiling.
Well,
and her message to all of us is, life is about the struggle. Keep smiling, keep fighting, hearts open, fists high. It was really an inspiring, moving moment. Karen Sauvigny and her widow, Judith Casson Windsor.
Yes.
We're going to keep the tradition high, and we all have to keep the tradition high. There's much more to say about it, which I'd be very happy to do.
Okay. Well,
but it was very moving.
All honor to Edie. So if you get down there to 2 Fifth Avenue, which is right next to the Washington Square Arch.
Right.
So you can see it on the outside of the building, right?
Yes, it's right there.
Okay.
Bella Abzug, and right above it, Edie Windsor.
Our history being honored.
Yes.
Now, speaking of history, the American Museum of Natural History has on their board, and we've talked about this before, Rebecca Mercer, the Mercer family, which funds the alt-right. She's a climate change denier, and she's on the board of the American Museum of Natural History. And so, do we have this picture? Revolting lesbians went to the Museum of Natural History and marched through, if we can pull that up. Yeah, there they go, with Rebecca Mercer masks on, marching past the dinosaurs. Of course, the real dinosaur, I guess, is Rebecca Mercer, but they don't want to get rid of her because she's got a lot of money. That was so. Thank you to revolting lesbians. I'm not calling them revolting. That is their name. All right. All right. Let's see. Elsewhere on Trump stuff. Oh, did you read about this appointee that he made to the Department of Health and Human Services at a lower level? Her name is Zemina Barito. She was placed on leave because her tweets have come to light. One said, "Our forefathers would have hung Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton." I think she means hanged, but they are hung in their portraits and things. But she called Islam a cult. She used the hashtag ban Islam all the time. She pushed the Pizzagate conspiracy that said Hillary was running a child sex ring. Remember, this came up during the campaign. And she said that French President Macron was controlled by the Rothschild family.
And this is
She's an appointee to the Department of Health and Human Services.
What's her name?
A true anti-Semite because she hates Jews and Arabs. Her name is Ximena Barito, Barreto. She also called, now why is this relevant to the show? She also called Obama a pansy and a traitor. Oh, yes. But she was just suspended from her job. She wasn't fired. Thus, the Trump administration. Well, she doesn't sound too much worse than the boss, right? And then there's this whole thing, Blanche, about erasing us from the world and the census, the Department of Justice,
and taking all references to us out of the record,
out of the websites that for all the departments. The Department of Justice wants to remove questions about sexual orientation and gender identity from what's called the National Crime Victimization Survey. It's a confidential survey of 16 and 17-year-olds, but they say they're too young to be asked these questions. So 17 Democratic senators wrote to the Department of Justice, says, "Are you kidding?" But this is what's going on in Washington. But good news from Mike Pence's hometown of Columbus, Indiana. Have you ever been there?
No.
Beautiful town.
Actually, not.
Lots of modern architecture, little town. That's where Mike Pence is from. They had their first Pride Parade. It drew thousands of people, organized by high school students. How about that?
Great? Yes, the youth will make us free. Yes, march again, my darlings.
Who said that? Who said that, Blanche?
We must march again, my darlings.
Yes.
Jeanette Rankin, among other people.
Okay.
Ruth Gage Colby, the women of Wilp.
Anyway, the Pride Parade in Columbus, Indiana was endorsed by the school superintendent and the head of the Chamber of Commerce. We're getting very mainstream, although not in Washington. And then our former ambassador, he's now our former ambassador to Vietnam, he resigned, Ted Ozius, out gay guy. He said Trump pressured him to demand that Vietnam repatriate 8,000 war refugees. And he says, I couldn't do that. These people helped us out in the war. They got to America. You wanted me to tell the Vietnamese government to take them back? Yes. I mean, what would Eleanor say about this, Blanche?
She would say, "Now I know what fascism looks like, and I'm afraid this looks like fascism. It has all the earmarks of it, and a Trumpster in the White House who really is a very dangerous predator."
But in the face of that, and I agree, Eleanor,
yes.
Blanche,
yes.
I agree. But in the face of this, are we really doing enough?
Well, we really have to be organized. We have to march. We have to
We are doing
connect.
that, but it doesn't seem to be enough.
Well, I don't know why.
To scare the Republicans enough into taking him out, or at least putting checks on him.
Yes. Well, we really need to put pressure.
Well, we do have midterm elections coming up in 2018.
Organize. All right. We will march and organize.
Shall we talk about, we have three major obituaries to talk about this week. And the first one is, will warn you, very disturbing. David Buckel, who was a former director of Lambda's marriage project. He has died at the age of 60. He did it, and he left Lambda, I think, around 2008, and he became an environmental activist, although he'd always been. There he is, David Buckel. We're going to talk about the cases that he was famous for, but what he did was he immolated himself. He burned himself to death in Prospect Park. A shocking end. And he said he did it to call attention to the destruction of the planet. You know, now some people look at this and say, well, he must have been very depressed. He must have been crazy. I mean, they have interviewed his partner of 34 years, Terry Kelber.
And his family.
And his family. And they were not, you know, they didn't know he was going to do this. You know, it certainly has drawn a lot of attention to the environmental cause because it made front page news across the country, but people just don't quite know. We've had him as a guest on this show because he dealt with so many landmark cases. He was involved with the Boy Scouts case, you know, at the Supreme Court. He was the attorney for, remember Jamie Nabozny, who was fighting for respect as a student in the schools? He won that case. You remember Boys Don't Cry, the movie about the transgender, you know, right? Brandon Tina made into the movie Boys Don't Cry. Well, the sheriff in that town alerted the rapists of Brandon Tina that he had turned them in, and they went off and killed him. And he argued a case that that found the sheriff liable for not protecting Brandon Tina in that case. He also raised a daughter with a lesbian couple. He and Terry. It's obviously a very sad case. I mean, what do you? I mean, we don't have much of a precedent for that in this country.
Well, the self-immolation that happened during the war in Vietnam, where people were demonstrating, this is what you're doing.
Well, Buddhist monks did it.
Yes.
To protest the way the South Vietnamese government treated them, which was like crap. That it wasn't just the war; it was the way the South, and it turned Americans against the war, in many ways.
And I think his thought is, if you see the tragedy coming, I'm demonstrating the tragedy coming.
Well, we're all in a lot of pain, right?
It's really very bitter, and to leave his family that way and not warn them, and it's inexplicable.
All I can say is we are all in a lot of pain over what's going on,
right? And
we need to support each other better. But I mean, I also don't want to dismiss, you know, what he was trying to say. But you know, I just hope we take care of each other. And it sounds like a cliche. Well, let's move on to Donna Redwing. All right. Donna was, we have a picture of her. Donna was once dubbed the most dangerous woman in America by the right-wing Christian Coalition. She's died at the age of 67. You said it was lung cancer?
It was lung cancer.
Yeah. She was a longtime lesbian activist, most recently as executive director of One Iowa, the group there, and she served as director of the Lesbian Community Project in Oregon. We used to have to fight all these ballot initiatives in Oregon, and she was very successful in fighting them back in the early 90s. She was National Field Director of GLAAD, National Field Director of Human Rights Campaign, one of 3 members of Obama's LGBT kitchen cabinet. I didn't even know he had one. Were you in it?
No.
I wasn't in it either.
Not in it.
But she was also famous for forming a friendship with a guy named Bob Vanderplatz of the Family Leader, which was the right-wing group there, her opposition. And they embraced each other at the Supreme Court. And the reason she was willing to have coffee and befriend somebody from the other side, she said, we were winning, she said. We were winning. And I started asking, what kind of winners are we going to be? We need to change hearts and minds, and I'm tired of the hate. And the last obituary we have is of J.D. McCLatchy, who was the out-gay author of 8 volumes of poetry. He's died at the age of 72. He appeared frequently in the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Paris Review. He wrote the libretto for Ned Rorem's opera of Our Town, and he won 2 Lambda Literary Awards. And he was a chancellor of the American Academy of Arts and Letters. But he wrote this, and this is what we put on the screen. No poem should be an urn to contain a meaning, but a net to catch what meanings float through the day.
That's great.
What do you think about that?
I love that. That's really splendid.
All right, J.D. McCLatchy. All right.
Great.
Shall we go to some national news, state news at this point? Cynthia Nixon.
There we go. That's good news.
She has gotten the endorsement of the Working Families Party.
Yes.
Some of the unions have left the Working Families Party over this because they're sticking with the governor, Andrew Cuomo, who they think is going to win. But she's encroaching on him in the polls. It's not, I wouldn't say it's close, but she's making up ground.
And she has a great vision.
She came out for the legalization of marijuana.
Yes, she has a great vision, and she's very courageous. And as Eleanor Roosevelt always said, courage can be as contagious as fear.
Ah, and we have nothing to fear but fear itself. So Cynthia's not afraid. She's not even afraid of Andrew Cuomo, who has a lot of money. She did call for the legalization of marijuana, and that made him consider it. Last year, he was calling it a gateway drug. This year, and we have medical marijuana in New York, but it's very restricted. So now everybody's calling for the legalization of marijuana.
Right.
John Boehner is calling for the legalization of marijuana. Did you read this?
I didn't know
Oh,
that.
yes.
My
He's
God.
representing some trade association that wants to make money off it. But she pointed out that the marijuana laws are enforced almost entirely against people of color, and it's effectively legal for most white people. But she's got a point about that, although it may be different around the country. Anyway, so she got their endorsement. Violence. Data from the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs saw an 86% rise in homicides of LGBT people in 2017. 86%. Now that's reported, and some of that may be we're better at reporting, but that's awfully high. I also have to think it has to do with the atmosphere that we're in.
And the Southern Poverty Law Center has said the explosion of right-wing groups, alt-right groups, hate groups has really been phenomenal.
How do we?
Trump is really,
How do we get it back in the can? How do you make people ashamed again of expressing their bigotry the way they express it these days?
Well, I think once again it's organizing, it's loving our neighbor. A long time ago, Wendell Willkie wrote a book, One World.
Wendell Willkie, who Franklin
Willkie.
Roosevelt beat for the presidency in 1940.
That's right, but then sent on a round the world tour, and he had an epiphany. Everything that happens anywhere affects everybody, everywhere. We are all united, one world.
Yes, Blanche, I agree with you, but how are we going to get back to where we were, where people are at least polite to each other?
Well,
maybe Donna Redwing
Claire
can teach
says we
us
don't
something
have to
about
love
that.
each other, but we have to respect each other. And we have to see the humanity in each other. It has to move forward.
We'll try.
Okay.
Back to the news. There's a new study that's been funded of trans children down to the age of 3 under a 5-year, $1 million grant from the National Science Foundation. How did this escape the attention of the Trump administration that they funded this? It went to a University of Washington psychologist, Christina Olson, 36. It's trying to help pediatricians understand gender diversity.
Because children are so often born with two sexes, with two genders.
Well, in between, sure.
Yes, and then they'll cut one off, and the other one is the real one.
Try to.
And so that's the explosion of trans reality.
Yes.
And that's beginning to change in the medical profession.
Okay. You remember Sally Ride, the first woman in space, but also a lesbian, although didn't live as an out lesbian other than within her circle. Anyway, they're giving her a stamp.
Good. And Billie Jean King will be there for the
on May 23rd.
Yes.
And a woman named Ellen Ochoa, who was a NASA astronaut, are going to preside there in San Diego at 5 o'clock at the University of San Diego.
California
Price Center.
Oh.
I thought it might have been the Pride Center, but it's the Price Center. Okay. Where are we on this list? All right. What did a former Miss America do last week, Blanche?
She got married to her lesbian lover.
She did.
To her lesbian lover in Alabama. Do we have a picture?
There's the happy couple.
Yes.
Her name is Deirdre Downs, and then she got married to a man named Gunn, so she was Deirdre Downs Gunn, and she married a woman named Abbott Jones. She now specializes in reproductive endocrinology at the University of Alabama.
Isn't that great?
That's quite something for a Miss America. Well, congratulations there. That's great. There was a lesbian contestant in Miss America, I think, last year for the first time. Out lesbian, anyway.
Oh, I
Yes.
didn't know that.
Oh, what do we think about these things, these
I think it's
beauty
great.
pageants these days? Come on, Blanche.
Well,
yes?
why not?
Still great? Why not?
Why
All right.
not?
All right. In Illinois, in Burlington, an out teacher named Nathan Etter, all right, he got in trouble because he received flowers from his husband during the class that he delivered flowers, and the principal heard about this and reprimanded him and said, "Stick to the curriculum." Now you're a professor. Would you be reprimanded for this
Well,
if Claire sent you some flowers?
No, and it wasn't. Was this the person who was fired?
He wasn't fired.
He
no.
wasn't fired. Okay.
He had to
was
go to the school
reprimanded.
board. He went to the school board and wanted an apology. They wouldn't give him an apology. They just said, "We respect diversity." Would
Good.
You know,
That's
so
good.
They backed off a little bit. What do you think?
Jonathan Sillen has just written a wonderful memoir, and there was a big party for Jonathan Sillen.
Big activist on Long Island.
Big activist, and the new memoir is about his life as an educator and how important it is to embrace your students with your reality and to be out.
How did you deal with that as a professor at John Jay and at the Graduate Center?
Well, I have the great good fortune to teach veterans, police officers, firefighters at John Jay over the years.
Big liberals.
Well, people eager to learn.
Yeah.
And Audrey Lord and I taught a class, Women in Black and White, in 1971. And the bar girls heard that we were doing it, and they came to our class, and our students brought their mothers and wives and sisters. It was the biggest thing. And we were outed by some of the students. We were posing as merely divorced women, which we also were.
Oh.
And then Marty Duberman founded the Gay Academic Union at John Jay, and there was a fire drill. And we were all out on the street for the fire drill. The next day, the president, who had a gay daughter, said, "I hear you had a wonderful meeting yesterday." And we were all out. So that's how it started.
And how did it feel back in the early 70s
well,
then?
It felt great. It felt great. And as Edie Windsor always said, it's important to be out. And yesterday at the celebration for Edie Windsor, everybody said it took great courage to be out when she came out in the 60s, and takes great courage now, but it's the most important thing to do as we go forward.
Have you got all that? Good. Okay. Well, we had the experience last week of Ronan Farrow essentially finally confirming what we all thought, which is that he said, "I'm part of the LGBT community." He didn't say which part, but he basically was a coming out thing at a gay event where he came out. And what happens? The following week, he wins a Pulitzer Prize, right?
Right.
You know? Hey, think about it.
That's really good. And he's Mia Farrow's son?
He's Mia Farrow's son. We don't know who his father is. Technically, his father is Woody Allen. Most people think it's Frank Sinatra. He doesn't confirm or deny. He kind of looks like Frank, don't you think, Rob? Yeah, well, but I think it looks a lot like Mia. Anyway, he won for a very serious thing. He wrote these terrific articles in the New Yorker about the Harvey Weinstein scandal.
Right.
I mean, they were shattering.
Terrific, yes.
And so he and the New York Times, reporters from the New York Times, who also exposed Harvey Weinstein, shared in this particular Pulitzer. And the Washington Post reporters won for exposing Roy Moore for all of his little dalliances with teenage girls. So the Pulitzers, it was a good year for journalism.
Good year.
You know, a bad year for the country.
But a good year for
but a very
journalism.
good, well, maybe that's what it takes, but it's a high price to pay.
Yep.
All right, now we have another groundbreaking case in Oklahoma of a transgender professor at Southeastern Oklahoma State University, Rachel Tudor. She was declared by a federal court to have suffered sex discrimination in violation of Title VII. Very important, right? When she was denied tenure. And the jury awarded her $1.7 million. But the judge only awarded her $60,000 in addition to compensate for denying reinstatement. He said, "I'm not reinstating you. It's too much bad blood between you." Well, she may appeal that aspect of it, but it's a big, big breakthrough in Oklahoma.
But didn't she get another job?
I imagine she
yeah,
would.
she
you know,
did.
I used to be a city human rights commissioner in New York, unpaid, but people would call me and say, oh, I got this complaint, here's what's going on. I said, first thing to do, get another job. Don't wait for this case to be settled. Don't put your life on hold waiting for justice. It can take years. Get another job, move on. Maybe you'll win, maybe you won't. If you win, it'd be great. You know, maybe you can be reinstated. That's the advice to all of you out there. Move on. Don't give up the fight for justice, but get another job.
Right.
All right. Marquette University, a Jesuit-run Catholic school, they were going to have an LGBTQ prom.
Dance, right.
A dance. And there's a right-wing group at the university, a student group, which wanted to get it canceled. They said, this offends God. That's what they said. They said homosexuality is an intrinsic disorder according to our faith. At least they were stating the actual
facts
of what the church teaches. Yeah. But Marquette backed up the kids. It's very hard for a university, Georgetown, Marquette, all these Catholic schools. They have to let the gay groups meet. Even the evangelical schools are letting gay groups meet in some places because the young people, they get it and they don't, you know. All right, how are we doing on time? We have to 37. We're going to bring in a guest. All right, so let's move on to international news, shall we?
Yes.
Okay. China.
That's really good news.
Talk about it.
Well, the Chinese LGBT community beat a gay ban in just 3 days. A gay ban, they created, the LGBT community of China created a hashtag that was seen 2.4 billion times.
Wow. Are you kidding?
2.4 billion times. They contacted the media.
Hashtag I am gay in China.
In China. And so Weibo caved. There is no more gay ban, and we have to congratulate China's 100 plus million LGBT community.
I mean,
this is really big.
China's very skittish about this stuff, and the thing is they had, this was a social media network they have, and
right.
the site announced that they were going to have a cleanup campaign, and they were going to get rid of...
ban gay content.
Well, not just gay content. What else were they going to ban? We were thrown in with pornography and violence. So people don't object to banning pornography and violence on this site, but they said you can't ban us.
Right.
And this
when they site had 400 million active monthly users.
Right.
So that this, you know,
it's a terrific victory.
It's really a big victory.
But something else happened over there in Asia that was not so good. You know, we've been telling you that Taiwan, right? The High Court in Taiwan said, you got to do same-sex marriage. We're going to give you to May 2019 to do it. That will be a 2-year limit. But the right-wingers there, they want to put a thing on the ballot, on a referendum, that would ban same-sex marriage, maybe do civil partnerships, and also ask people how they feel about teaching elementary school students and junior high school students about LGBT issues. And the Election Commission is going to allow this. So all they have to do now is collect signatures from 1.5% of the population, and they can put this on the ballot, and then we might not be protected by the court. So this is a turn for the worse in Taiwan, unless we win. Now, you know, I hate it when we have to vote any place where they vote on civil rights. There's a lot of it that's going on in this country, you know. But you know, because it's ugly when your rights are being debated in the public. But it also would be a massive education campaign on these issues. So that would be the price to pay. Yeah. There's now an openly gay candidate for president of Poland. You heard it right. The election's not until 2020, but there's an out gay mayor in Poland. His name is Robert Biedron, and he's very
cute.
He's very popular. Well,
he really is cute.
It's for you to say,
yeah,
Blanche.
Well, I thought he was really
me.
cute.
And he's got a husband, right?
Right, north of Warsaw.
I don't know if their marriage is. I don't think their marriage is recognized in Poland, and so anyway.
But that's big, given
that's big
how
news.
conservative Europe has been going.
Now let's
so
talk.
This is big.
Let's talk about the Commonwealth.
Yes, the Commonwealth.
Okay.
Yes.
So, Britain introduced anti-buggery laws throughout the Commonwealth. Whenever they colonized people, they had anti-buggery laws that started in the Victorian era.
Right.
I mean, they had other laws about sodomy before that, but
that was the big law.
that was the big law.
Under Victoria. It included
not-
women, but
no, it
Queen
didn't. No, it
Victoria
didn't.
said, no, you can't include that. I never heard of such a
No,
thing.
what she said was,
Yes.
women don't do such things. That was her famous quote.
Women don't do such things.
Well.
But there are 37 Commonwealth nations where it is punished by imprisonment. And it's illegal. I mean, it's really shockingly illegal but not enforced in very interesting tourist places. Barbados, the Cook Islands, Jamaica, Malawi, Samoa, and then
On and
in
on.
Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, Trinidad and
We're
Tobago,
gonna-
the High Court judge this week, that's the
not
news,
good.
said
Yes.
it's unconstitutional.
Right.
But the government is sort of, what's the word,
Waffling.
trying to appeal it
Yeah.
to a big, because the
But places
country is
where
rather
it's
conservative.
punished by imprisonment: Antigua, Bangladesh, Cameroon, Ghana, Grenada, Swaziland, Solomon Islands, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, Papua New Guinea, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, India, Kenya, Pakistan, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia. Also punished by death in Brunei and in Nigeria, where the northern
Well,
states.
Blanche, I mean, sodomy was the law in many states in America until 2003. That's how long it took for the Supreme Court to declare it unconstitutional. The Supreme Court of the United States upheld those laws in 1986. And we had the death penalty here too, and back in colonial times. And Thomas Jefferson tried to institute a liberal reform. He wanted to make it castration instead of death, but he was not successful.
Really?
Yes. So we don't have a much of a history on this either. But Britain recognizes that recognizes that it's bad. So Theresa May, the Prime Minister, spoke out against this and apologized, but she didn't do it in front of the Commonwealth meeting, which is meeting now in London. But they did get. Tom Daley spoke out about this. The diver. He won the gold. He won the gold medal at the Commonwealth Games, which are in Australia. Don't get to try to stay with this. And he spoke out when he got the medal, saying, I'm out gay, and it's very nice, but in 37 countries, all you have to do is refer to Blanche's list. It's illegal, and it shouldn't be. So this was brought up to Boris Johnson, who's the foreign minister of Britain, and he said, I will bring it up.
I will
with
bring
them.
it up.
Well, bring it up.
We're looking at a moment of transition and change, even in the colonies.
But deal with
in the
this.
empire.
Deal with this.
Yes.
Frank Mugisha of Uganda, he's a gay activist who's been on this show. He called for quiet diplomacy rather than Britain lecturing Commonwealth nations and just support the activists on the ground. So this is a little dicey, Britain imposed the anti-gay laws. Do you want Britain to run this big campaign to get rid of them, or do you want to support the local activists as they work it through?
Well,
What do you think, Blanche?
local activism is very important.
Well, all right, it's important, but it's a tough thing to face.
Well,
when
the empire's sort of over, isn't it?
the empire. All right, in Costa Rica, they're delaying acting on the marriage ruling. They were ordered to do same-sex marriage. They may toss it to the Legislative Assembly. In Romania, they have a left-wing ruling party, but they're planning to rally 1 million people against same-sex marriage and maybe do civil partnerships. Romania, my old stomping grounds for my grandparents, actually. Anyway.
I thought it was a right-wing.
This rally is being organized by the left-wing party PSD. That's what I read. We will make corrections next week if we got this wrong. And 2 women in the Cayman Islands are suing after they were rejected by the General Register there to get their marriage registered. To marry. They are living in England, but they're from the Cayman Islands, and so they want to get married at their home. They could get married in England and then try to fight to get recognized, but it's another British overseas territory. And Israel is going to stop keeping trans inmates in isolation, so good for them. Okay, some AIDS news. Do you remember this Conchita Wurst? Did you ever hear of Conchita Wurst?
No.
You didn't? No. Conchita. Rob knows who she is. Conchita Wurst is an Austrian who won the Eurovision Song Contest. It's the biggest thing in the world outside of this country. That was in 2014. Conchita's real name is Thomas Neuwirth, and when we refer to Thomas, we say he, and Conchita, we say she, according to, all right? But
So they're they.
Well,
Yes.
Thomas says, he was threatened with blackmail by an ex-boyfriend, so he just came out as HIV positive. He said he wasn't going to be blackmailed. He's been HIV positive for many years. So good on you, Thomas, Conchita. All right. Some entertainment news. Now you went to a conference on radical feminism and LGBTQ history,
Yes.
Blanche. What's the headline?
The headline is Marcia Gallo, the author of Different Daughters, A History of the Daughters of Bilitis, and the Rise of the Lesbian Rights Movement, which she wrote in 2006, and then No One Helped Kitty Genovese, and the Myth of Urban Apathy, yes, in 2015, is now working on a very, very exciting book called Bodies of Evidence, The Practice of Queer Oral. That's a book that is out, but she's working on this new book, Radical Feminism and LGBTQ History.
Well, our movement kind of grew out of the feminist movement, basically. And the civil rights movement.
And
that's what was happening at the time
civil rights movement.
In 1969.
Yes, indeed. But Marcia Gallo's book, which includes the early 60s folks like Chebe, Betty Powell, and Charlotte Bunch, and Claire and me, and a whole lot of folks were there. The Lesbian History Archives folks were there.
Joan
Nessel, and who's now living in Australia.
Really?
Yes. But it was really
part of the Commonwealth.
Part of the Commonwealth. It was absolutely fabulous, and we're all thrilled with. And this, I just want to say one thing. This was at the New York Public Library. She received the Marty Duberman Fellowship this year. This was a big
You keep mentioning Marty Duberman. He was a big gay author, and he must be well into his 80s now, I guess.
He's a bit retired, but very active.
Wrote a book about Stonewall.
Yes. The library, dozens of books. He writes a book a minute, actually. Right. But the library is having a whole series called Peace, Love, and Revolution. And I think there's something wonderful.
Okay, and you also want to recommend a new book about the horrible genocidal fire at the Upstairs Lounge, a gay bar in New Orleans.
Yes.
Back in it was in the early 70s.
Right. It's a wonderful new book that's coming out by Robert Fiesler, Fiesler, called Tinderbox.
Okay.
And I blurbed the book, and Ron Collins blurbed
And there was a documentary about this as well.
Yeah.
A lot of Metropolitan
It's the Upstairs Lounge.
A lot of Metropolitan Community Church members were there. Many scores of them were. It was about 30 people who were killed at that fire. It's a thing in our history, and it wasn't really properly investigated by the authorities in New Orleans.
And the book is more than a memorial. Like all of our work, it's a call for our ongoing struggle to build movements for love and dignity for everyone, everywhere.
We'll try.
And that's what we have to do.
You are? Yes. Okay. All right, I want to run through a couple of brief play reviews. It's a busy theater season right now. The first one I want to recommend is King Lear from the Royal Shakespeare Company at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. There's Sir Anthony Sher. Go see him till April 29th. It is his last Shakespeare role. He says once you've climbed this mountain, that's it. There's really no place to go. But you know, the Royal Shakespeare Company, they've been doing this particular play, this production for 2 years now. So we're getting them as they're totally in the roles. Well done all the way. It's a great ensemble. I saw the revival of Children of a Lesser God on Broadway, starring Joshua Jackson and Lauren Ridloff. These are good performances. It's kind of a weak play, and I tell you, I mean, it's a lot of work for these two, but I was almost ready to leave because it just didn't seem to be going anywhere, and it kind of ambushed me at the end and really became quite moving. And it's all about, a teacher who can hear and can speak, and he falls in love with this woman who is deaf. And it really has a harrowing climax. That's all I'll say about it. And I saw the musical of Tina Fey's Mean Girls on Broadway. Now, this seemed to satisfy the fans of the movie. All right, but it's directed by Casey Nicholaw, who's the hot director on Broadway. The Book of Mormon, Something Rotten, all those things, right? But he says he purposely cast 30-year-olds playing high school students because they have more chops, and it kind of threw me a bit.
That's funny.
But you may enjoy it if you like the movie. All right, we are at the time we want to bring in our guest. We are going to be joined now. I will introduce him now by Aine Gordon. Aine has welcome.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Great.
Aine has written a play called The 217 Boxes of Dr. Henry Anonymous about Dr. John Fryer, right?
Yep.
Who was a psychiatrist in the early 70s. Who we have a picture who testified at the American Psychiatric Association anonymously to try to speak about what it was like to be gay and why the American Psychiatric Association needed to change their policy that said that there's the panel.
Yep.
With a
Barbara
mask.
Giddings, Frank Kameny, and Dr. Henry
Fryer.
Anonymous. And within a year, the American Psychiatric Association changes their policy.
Yeah.
So what drew you to this subject?
It actually happened by accident. I had a 2-year residency at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania where his papers are. And I was taken on a tour the very first day, and the head archivist is gay. And he showed me a locked set of drawers and said, on the right are moves towards an ideal civilization, and on the left are our stumbles along the way. Great
Ooh,
setup.
Great setup.
And when we looked at the stumbles along the way, the first thing was Drum Magazine, which was an early LGBT magazine in Philadelphia. And in it, Barbara Giddings had written a think piece, and I went downstairs and started Googling Barbara Giddings and Frank, and in a minute I came across that picture. And a minute later, I found Fryer's speech and realized that it was in the building in which I sat.
Oh, wow.
And so I went over to the desk and said, you have his papers, can I see them? And, if the man is remembered at all, he's remembered as Dr. Anonymous. Dr. Fryer is not remembered.
Right.
In a sense, the mask is more famous than the man in it.
Yes.
Which is such a metaphor for queer history in general.
Well, your play, and I'm going to see it in May. First of all, tell us, the
May.
217 Boxes of Dr. Henry Anonymous. It's playing in New York.
At the Baryshnikov Art Center, May 3rd through 11th.
Okay, and we will put that in our email, give people all
That's
the information about the play.
And it is the 45th anniversary of the declassification of homosexuality as a mental disease.
Only 45 years.
45 years.
So I was sick for a while. Yes, and so were
We
you.
were cured overnight.
Even women who don't
Even
do such
women.
things.
We don't
So
do
it's the
such things.
45th
Right.
anniversary, and we're running concurrent to the American Psychiatric Association's conference, and so the attendees will also come to the play. And we have nightly talkbacks with the ACLU, with the Born Perfect campaign, with...
Oh, that's
But
great.
the play deals a lot with just how completely secret gay life was. Now, this is post-Stonewall, so the revolution has started. But in psychiatry, well, I mean, they couldn't find an out gay psychiatrist to speak, right?
No one would, because you would lose your job immediately because you would now be mentally ill, so you couldn't be practicing as a treater. And the thing about the classification is it was sort of the gateway. If we were mentally ill, we could be criminalized. If we could be criminalized, we could be thrown out of any position. So they figured, Barbara and Frank realized that somebody had to turn this around, and I think they spoke to at least 12 different psychiatrists, and nobody would do it. And finally, Dr. Fryer would only agree if he could wear the rubber joke shop mask, the oversized tuxedo, call himself Dr. Henry Anonymous, and speak into a distorting microphone.
But he apparently got fired later anyway.
Before.
We got fired before?
So he's risking his career. He had already been fired from UPenn and from the Friends Hospital.
Okay, here's the quote from the administrator, which I think is, the administrator said to him, look, if you were gay and not flamboyant, we could keep you.
Exactly.
If you were flamboyant and not gay, we could keep you. But since you are both gay and flamboyant, we cannot keep you.
Yes, exactly. So he had already been pushed out twice, and he was teaching at Temple by this time, but didn't have tenure. So he was taking an enormous risk. His career could have ended that day.
And there were, subsequently, I know, that some psychiatrists who appeared on panels, and when they went home to their jobs, they didn't have them.
Wasn't it also some people like Bernice Goodman, great social work activists, therapists who were behind this movement?
Yes,
Is there-
absolutely. The reason that this moment really happens with Barbara and Frank is that Frank had, the year before, in 71, he had disrupted an APA meeting saying, "You're killing us." Right. And so to the APA's credit, it said to Frank and Barbara, okay, let's have a panel. And the panel was called Psychiatry, Friend or Foe to the Homosexual.
Well,
Need we say more?
in the 60s, groups like even Mattachine would invite a psychiatrist in to explain why we were sick. In some cases. And then Mattachine started to get more radical members who said, we don't want to hear about this anymore. We feel fine. There was even I'm trying to look at the name of this panel that they did. Stop talking about us and start talking with us. And then they wanted to do one on lifestyles of non-patient homosexuals. Yeah. Because what? I don't know. I never went to a psychiatrist over this. I was having too much fun. But do you remember people Marty Duberman, you mentioned. He had a long period of trying to change. Larry Kramer went to a psychiatrist to try to change these older people, right? Yeah.
You know. Larry Kramer also spoke yesterday at Edie Windsor's. How old is Larry now?
He's in his early 80s. Yeah.
No, late 80s.
No. He's about 82, maybe. Yeah, at this point. Yeah. He's. But back, here's what I don't understand about this. I know a lot of people who were involved with this. Dr. Bruce Veller, who went on to run the National Gay Task Force, also was down there taking psychiatrists out to lunch. George Weinberg, who was a
I met him before he died.
Close friend of mine. He was involved in this. He wrote Society and the Healthy Homosexual. What I don't understand is they were making all this money saying we were sick, right? And that was kind of what they were holding on to. And then 1 year later, they changed. What do you think drove that?
Well, the beginning of the speech, the first words he says are, "I am a homosexual, I am a psychiatrist." And the room gasped because no one believed that that could be possible. So I think the testimony was so convincing, so first person, and so they all realized that he was, and he said, there are 200 more people in this room who we call ourselves the gay PA, and you are sitting next to one and you don't know it. So essentially,
dramatic.
Essentially he pushed the right button, and that was exactly what did it. There was not mass agreement. The board voted to do it, and then there were still members who didn't want to repeal it, and so they had to have the whole membership vote, and then it still passed.
Wasn't that prompted by Dr. Charles Socarides, who was one of the leading anti-gay psychiatrists, who only died not too long ago? Remember that name, right? There were some famous anti-gay psychiatrists. Because when we used to go to the library as kids, if you wanted a book on homosexuality, it was negative. It was telling you that you were sick. If you looked up homosexuality in the New York Times Index, it said, "See perversion."
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, in the 50s. So, but yes, Charles Socarides, who ended up having a gay son who became a gay activist, but he organized this, and he never gave up on. Some of these people never gave up on this.
It still sometimes is brought up as a thing that should be overturned. It's still there. The APA is very clear. It's small factions of the membership. The APA is not going to change.
But they have a policy against conversion therapy.
They do.
Right?
However, it is still legal in more than 40 states.
Well, yes.
40 states.
Well, I mean, but that's one of the news things this week. Many states are now banning it. And usually they just ban it, you can't do it with kids, minors they call them.
right.
I don't mean the people in the mines,
Yes.
it's
Underage.
kids.
Right.
Underage people, you can't do this. But they're starting to call it consumer fraud with adults.
That's great.
So if you want to do it, you're engaging in fraud.
Right.
I mean, the only people who want to do it these days basically are these religious nuts, right? Pretty much?
Yeah. One
Pretty
would
much?
hope. But, you know, often to their children, and that's the fear.
Now tell us more a little bit about the play and what you go
So
into.
in the play
you have
are-
his father as a character as
Right,
well.
so the three characters in the play are a man named Alfred A. Gross. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He ran a small foundation in New York pre-Stonewall that helped men in trouble with the law.
Wow.
And essentially they would look for friendly psychiatrists to come in and do the evaluation for the court to help these men who were essentially arrested on cottaging or soliciting. And he found Fryer and he worked together for a while pre-Stonewall. So he's the first character. And the second character is his secretary of 24 years with whom he had a sort of platonic marriage. And the third is his father, who never acknowledged his homosexuality, but who actually gives the speech at the end of the play
Oh.
as a way to finally acknowledge who his son was.
And this father was from Kentucky.
Yes, Lexington, Kentucky, Winchester, Lexington, Kentucky, born in 1901, blue collar, no college degree. Totally his, not in any way the preparation for who his son became.
Did he embrace his son at the end?
He
And that's what
wrote
gives us-
letters to him that were always signed "Love Daddy," which to me, for a Southern man in the middle of the 20th century, seemed so radical. But he never acknowledged his sexuality, so I thought we could bring him to a moment in the play he didn't have in life.
Oh, he didn't have in life.
Yeah.
Okay.
What else are you working on?
Gosh, I have another show that I did last May called Radicals in Miniature, which is touring starting this May, Gay Pride at the Festival of Arts and Ideas in New Haven.
Okay. But we want people to learn about this one. So let's
Come to
tell
this one.
people once again.
217 boxes of Dr. I don't know what camera I'm on.
you're over
217
here.
boxes of Dr.
Over here.
Henry Anonymous at the Baryshnikov Art Center on 37th Street, opening May 3rd, closing May 11th. You can Google 217boxes.com and you will find all the information.
Okay. Very, very good. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Blanche Wiesen-Cook, for being with us.
Thank you, darling. It was
And
really great fun.
Great fun. And next week we will have Rob Shooter of naughtygossip.com. He's sitting right here, folks. But he's going to be joining me at this table to do combat with all of us and convey the news to the world. Thank you for being with us, and we will see you next week.
That was great.